What's up? I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is for Figure It Out. I'm joined today with Linda Melone. I think that regardless of what your career or industry is, the most important skill you can have is being able to introduce yourself effectively. So, Linda, do you mind introducing yourself, giving us some information on your background?
Sure. I'm Linda Melone, obviously. I have been a writer since about 2002. I'm now a conversion copywriter, which I can talk about during the interview, but I have probably the most varied background of anyone you've talked to. I've been a pastry chef, I've been a bakery owner, I've been a personal trainer, which people think I created my own clientele from the bakery, but I've just always been drawn towards like creative fields. And my whole thing is if it's not fun anymore, I get out of it. And so I tend to do things 110% burnout and then leave it. But writing has always been the undercurrent of everything. I've always loved it since I was a kid. I mean, I just remember writing stories when I was, just old enough to put together a sentence. And it's always been kind of in the background. And so what happened is I was working as a personal trainer, just in-home training. And I would receive this because this is a way to get like kind of jumping ahead a little bit on how to get started on doing this writing is I started getting just a free publication that was left on my driveway. And it had a column that was a fitness column. And I thought, you know what, I can do this. And it was a local magazine. And I just sent the editor a pitch. And, I always know I love to write. And so he says, sure, we'll give you $200 for it. And I thought, I'm going to get paid for this? Is this crazy? This is always something I wanted to do, but just never thought of getting paid. And so I wrote the column and the editor called me the next day and said, do you want to write for us? Because this is really good. And so I just always had sort of a knack for it. And so long story short, I started writing for him. I ended up doing cover stories, and it was OC Metro was a business publication. I won a couple of awards and everything. And then I just started branching out into the national publications. I ended up writing content for mostly print publications, but then gradually went to online, MSN Health. But I've been in Time Magazine, I've written for Huffington Post. I mean, pretty much you name it, I've been in it. I've had bylines in there. But then what happened is there was a shift where print publication just tanked. And I'll never forget the day I was, like I mentioned, MSN, because I was writing so much for them. I could have just supported myself on that. It was 4 slideshow, they had these slideshows, 4 slideshows a month. I was blogging 8 times a month. And one day my editor said, you know what? I hate to tell you this, but we're switching to all refurbished material and we're not using freelancers anymore. And that's one of those days when you just you walk away from your computer and just leave the house for a while. It was that sudden though. And basically everything went digital. So I started writing for a lot of digital. I mean, they were digital, but it wasn't exclusively at that point all I was doing. And then it ended up just, I just couldn't make the same kind of money. So I ended up doing an online business. I'm a fitness trainer. So I took everything online and I just wanted to go back to writing. So a few years ago, I just said, I want to go back to writing, but I don't want to do content. So conversion copywriting was something that popped up on my radar, and it's very different from content. So it's something that I found that I really love, but it's been a shift. So that's kind of 20 years in a nutshell.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that is quite the journey. It's actually funny because, I'm similar situation myself. I was a guitar teacher at the local music shop at 16. And then as far as professionally, one of the weirdest things was moving out to Taiwan, and I ended up living 15 years in Taiwan, and so some of it was doing translation work of Mandarin, and then but most of it was the English teaching. But then I ended up coming back to Canada and working for oneshoppingcart.com, which is web.com. And then from there, I ended up creating my agency, which became funnelfixing.com, helping people with their online funnels. So, and so with that technical background, once I was, building up to bigger and better clients, I eventually ended up helping a real estate company, and they had the kind of money to afford copywriters. And it really caught my attention once I was saying, it's like, hey, like sometimes this copywriter is actually making more than I am on these pieces. And that, like, I'm no slouch, right? So like, that's like, that was, I had to figure out what's going on. What is that secret sauce? Because would you agree that I guess I should go back to why I had a huge pause in playing guitar, which was that if I was playing for myself, then I'd know what was going on, but I'd have a certain degree of, if I was just playing like classical for people, like they wouldn't get it anyway. And I think that's one of those things, maybe it's just all art, but I'd like to know what your remarks are in this context of writing, about how some people, it seems like they can't tell the difference between, garbage writing, good writing, and great writing. So like do you think that's all arts, or maybe there's some specific things that makes you think of when it comes to writing?
I mean, it's both, it's also different between content and copy. You want me to just tell you quickly, because it's, what's the difference? Content writing is for information or entertainment, like blogs and articles. And then copywriting is different because there's a goal where you want people to take action. So the difference, the similarity is that both of them require research, and both of them require, but copy is a different, the research is different. So in other words, for content, most of my research would be the journals and interviewing experts, where now copywriting is more the research of the person or the business's target audience and their competitors, and really digging into what are people saying about their product, what are their competitors saying. And so it's a whole different approach. But the thing that ties good writing together is knowing how to put those things together in a way that is interesting enough for people will read it. And so for content, it's a flow. Usually you start out with a bang, a story, you see this, a quote from somebody, and then you read it, you lead into the rest of the article. And with copy, it's the headline. You've probably heard this, 80 to 90% of people just read a headline. So that's where you spend a lot of your time on. But then the body, I mean, if the rest of the copy is crap, obviously people aren't going to read it once they get past the headline. So you do have to keep that energy going. But there are rules to it, but there's fewer rules with copywriting than there are with content, because the editors I used to work with, for example, I worked with a family circle editor. I won an award for them, and the editor and I got to be pretty close, and she would give me tips on, like, here, this is what you need to do with your writing. This will make it really clear. And it was just a little bit different than copywriting, which it doesn't follow the same rules. For example, it's more conversational, and you can use slang where you may not use it in content. So it's a little bit different that way. But it's an art and a science, both of them, really.
That's interesting. One of the things that I've been thinking about, though, so I guess it goes back. The whole reason why my job experience was relevant was to basically talk about what my own process was when, for each of my jobs, there was usually a necessity involved. So one of the things I didn't really have was any opportunity to retrain. I've had to change careers a few times, but I never had time or resources to, stop and go to school and do nothing else. So that was one of the things that inspired me to make this series of saying, like, what if you have no safety net of cash or friends or family? So, so for me, it was necessity that brought me to writing. And one of the most valuable things I've thought of for being a more effective writer is kind of like letting more people in your head, and just allowing yourself to just, speak with their voice or something like that, or just basically, I think the other saying I heard, I forgot who said it. It was something about like, it's like the voice in your head got better at writing or expressing what they feel or something like that. That's basically what the writer's job is to put it out there in that way. So what do you got as far as like a similar experience as far as like to what I'm describing as like letting more people into your head, or like I don't know, maybe it's just allowing yourself to travel down other ways of thinking further, like do you do anything like that to improve your writing?
I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about, but like if I'm doing research for a client and I immerse myself in their business, like everything, I read everything. I have an obsessive personality anyway, so it works in this way where I will read everything I can. I will talk to people who are potential clients or customers, or the people who've used the product or people who haven't used the product, and I really get into what makes them flip the switch to say, yeah, I want this. So is that what you mean by kind of getting into their minds? Or
Well, I guess more what I'd be talking about is like if I were to do the same thing and do what I'm describing, it'd be like allow part of yourself to become a complete fanboy of the product or service or the person or whatever, and then just like think and write with that, that I don't know, this person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
how you get the best information. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you can't. Yeah. If you don't have an interest in the product or offer, or you don't believe in it, I mean, it shows in your writing if you're a copywriter.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even do a project like that I felt like I didn't click with. It's not going to be good.
Right. That makes sense. And these days, I'm spending a lot of time in commercial real estate circles, and the struggle that they have is regularly putting out content, just putting anything out there at all. And I'm usually the voice of saying that people are so forgetful. That like you're always overthinking it, and if you're trying to make it, I don't know why, and since you're such an experienced writer, I should ask you. I've been using Walt Whitman and Ernest Hemingway as examples, even though I've read like no Walt Whitman or Ernest Hemingway. I heard it's really good, and it's sounding good. Like I don't know, what do you think? Like, you know what I mean, though, right? Like in general, if you're not a professional writer, if you haven't studied writing, then it's not going to be Walt Whitman or Ernest Hemingway. What do you think?
Copy has to be in the voice of your customer. So, I mean, Hemingway, actually, there's an app, a Hemingway app. Have you heard of this?
No.
Where you plug in, I just actually posted, there's a link on LinkedIn. I posted, it's one of the principles of copywriting is you want to write at like a 5th grade level. And most people, especially if you're really experienced or know a lot about a particular subject, you tend to use bigger words, and if people can't understand it, they're just not going to read it. So the Hemingway app, you plug in your copy and it tells you where, like what grade level you're writing at. And so you want to, I hate it. It doesn't mean dumb it down. It's just use simpler words, that kind of thing. That's one of the ways, but everything I write for a client is based on my research. So it has to be something someone said to me. In fact, a lot of times during an interview, somebody will say something. This happened more than once where I'm like, this is going to be a headline. I could just tell they just encapsulated like everything, that the product should do or that people want to hear about. So it's like you have to really talk as if you are a customer of the product or service. So everything I do is just, I can back up every single thing I write with, okay, it's because your competitor said this, or your, people who use your product said this. Otherwise it doesn't belong there.
All right. So one thing about writing, and I've never supported myself financially as a writer. It's always been something else, my IT background or, that sort of thing that's actually paid my bills. But I'm just guessing that writing is the same as the other industries that I'm aware of, which is if you just sit there and do nothing, the money won't just fall on you. You actually do have to go out and engage some people in order to make it work. So,
Right. Yeah.
I think, so I cut to the chase on one part that comes out in all of these different interviews. It's, every single job is actual work. There's actual work, and you have to put in the time for it to work. It's not just going to fall from the sky. But
Right.
so that's one of the personality things where you have to be able to accept, that sort of struggle, that sort of those sorts of hours to get anywhere. But what are the things that a writer can do to start getting some traction in their career if they have no friends, family, or money to get them in the door?
I, I think what I did is probably what I'd recommend is you start locally. Like if you want to write for, you just look at what publications are out. I mean, print is not really the thing anymore, but to see what your local businesses are doing, if it's copywriting, what are they putting out in their ads? Can you do better than that? Can you, maybe make suggestions? I mean, we're talking now about kind of cold pitching, which is always hard. So in addition to that, I would ask friends. I mean, the first couple of people, my clients, were people that knew me from business networking events and that kind of thing. And I told them I was pivoting my business back to writing because, as I said, I was doing fitness online I did that for about 5 years. And the good thing about that is I learned all the tech behind it. I learned about funnels. I learned about, all the different launch strategies and that kind of thing, which helps me now. But I told a few people, hey, I'm going back to writing because this isn't working out. It's for a number of reasons. And so two people said, hey, I'm going to hire you right away. They knew I had the content writing background, but they didn't know, what I knew about copy. But start with your friends. You might have to do some free work for a while. And it's networking. It's always about the networking. I don't care what it is. And the thing that makes it hard is if you're a writer, you're probably an introvert. I'm an introvert. I'm not shy, but I'm an introvert. And like after this interview, I'll need to take a nap because talking for any length of time is hard.
I
So
have that effect on people. It's
putting people to sleep. No, it's just that it's hard because when you're writing, it's all about just focusing on it's all internal stuff, what's going on in your head and the research, and then to actually market yourself is the opposite. And even if it is LinkedIn or even if it is a networking event, it's different, and you have to really push to get out there. I've heard of writers that just will not get on video, which is why I do it, because I think I'm in the minority. You have to do what your competition won't, right?
right, right. That's beautiful. One of the things I've been telling people is that the two surest ways to stay broke are to fail to cultivate your marketing skills, and then the other one is negotiations. Negotiation skills are absolutely pivotal. You have to know how to say no. And you mentioned that you might have to work for free for a little bit as you're developing your career as a writer, and you're mentioning networking. And I guess that means that we have to get to the nitty gritty. I think at your point in your career, you're the same spot that I am, which is where you're not going to get any repercussions for telling the truth on this one, which is, it basically means you were working for somebody and then somebody else gave you a better offer and then you hopped over to them, right? And like some people, I think, especially if they've had a lower class upbringing, they'd be like, oh, well, I can't do that to my boss. That's not nice. And even though their boss would do it in a heartbeat, your boss would likely replace you in a heartbeat if you stopped doing what you're up to. Like when it comes, so is that a vivid picture of how you basically got up to better and better paying and more prestigious writing jobs?
Yeah, things came along. I mean, it's referrals now is starting to, pick up. But yeah, I mean, I think the general rule in my business is, you do something at one price for 5, 6 times. And then
Mhm.
when that becomes easy, and then the next client, like I wouldn't raise prices on a current client, but the next person will get charged more. So that way you don't have that whole debate, because it's, as you know, I mean, it's so much easier to keep working and to get more business from your current clients than it is to get a whole new client. So,
Mhm.
but
Did
yeah.
you also find the same experience where the lower priced gigs are usually more effort than the higher paying gigs as well, right? Like I found that higher paying gigs often are like, okay, money sent, thank you, and that's it. Whereas like the smaller ones is okay, well, we gotta make this work. This is a lot of riding on.
Right,
It's
exactly.
the
It's
same thing
usually
in.
the people that give you the hardest time are the ones that they start out of the gate with just arguing about how much it is. And that's usually a red flag, like, okay, if you can't afford it and you don't feel, if they don't see the value in what I do, then I'm not going to argue about it. It's like, this is what I do and this is the results I get. And, you know, if you don't, I'm just not here to prove something,
Mhm.
it's, and I don't think you should have to. I think the marketing is what should do the talking for you.
Right, right. That makes perfect sense. So, do you have any other advice for people? No cash, no friends, no family. Like what about like where you live? You mentioned networking. So, at least pre-COVID, anyway, like where you live has to matter because you're just hanging out with people who can actually afford you, right?
Yeah.
So, would you encourage relocating if you want to be a writer full time or?
I don't think so. I mean, writing now has changed so much, I don't think it matters as much as other types of businesses. I live in California, but we're actually thinking of moving to Arizona because it is just so pricey out here.
Mm,
Um, but I originally started in Connecticut, and that's, again, both coasts are pretty expensive.
yeah.
But writing, everything's remote now. And, there's not a lot of writing conferences. I mean, there's like an annual one. I don't think it's as important as it was in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah. I'm not as crazy about Arizona because of their water problems. So,
They have water problems.
yeah, yeah, same as California. So you might want to
Oh, the
look at,
drought kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, that kind of problem. So that's one thing to think about. But yeah, it really ought to be that way. But are there any social media platforms that you find are really effective at giving a good bang for your buck as far as or what do you want to call it, your social media hour, per day of engaging with people? Like what platforms do you find are more effective these days?
I just use LinkedIn. I mean, I was on Facebook, but it's so
It's
toxic. And
awful. It's the worst. It's
and you're not going to get business from it.
no,
I don't know.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get haters and trolls, but like, yeah, that's just nuts. All right. So one thing I do in my interviews with commercial real estate people is I ask them to describe the person who professionally they could help more than anybody else. Okay. And fortunately for you, unlike in real estate, there are some answers that are actually illegal, and more often they're the ones that you actually want to say, but you can't. But you, as a writer, you can say anybody you want. So this could be awesome. So who's the best person to reach out to you that you can help them more than anybody else right now?
Like my ideal client, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of client could you help better than any other kind?
Small businesses who maybe can't afford, they can't afford an in-house copywriter, or maybe even not a marketing person. If they're bigger and they have a marketing person, but the marketing person doesn't do copywriting, which usually they don't,
Right.
that's where I find the easiest fit. I've worked with huge companies and I've worked with, small solopreneurs, and the big companies, it's just harder. Just everything just takes so much longer. And then the smaller ones, they usually have a budget that we have to do so much debating that it's just like we just said earlier, it's just usually not worth it. So just small businesses that are looking to improve their conversions, that.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. And if what is the best way to reach out and get your services? Is it through your LinkedIn profile or is there a website?
There's a website. It's the Copyworks, worx.com, or you can email me at linda@thecopyworks.com. Either way.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming out today. This is a really cool one because I think that introverts don't have a whole lot of options when it comes to work, and I think it's one where you can make a real difference in people's lives. So thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you for having me on.